I was reclining on my couch browsing through my phone when it buzzed. The name on the display made me sit up immediately. Liam, we hadn't spoken in months, not since he relocated to Austin for some employment opportunity he couldn't decline. We grew up alongside each other, devoted every weekend at each other's residences, understood each other's families like our own. So when he phoned at almost midnight on a Thursday, I recognized something was incorrect. I responded. His voice arrived through tense and trembling. Jake, man, I require your assistance. He sounded frightened. And Liam never sounded frightened. It's my mother. I've been contacting her all day and she's not responding. She always responds. Always. Something's incorrect. My stomach plummeted. Christine, I hadn't observed her in perhaps 2 years, but I remembered her distinctly. She was the variety of mom who made you feel welcome the instant you walked in the entrance, always grinning, always inquiring how you were managing, like she actually concerned about the response. The variety of individual who made you feel less isolated just by being present. Perhaps her phone expired, I stated, attempting to settle him down. No, Jake, you don't comprehend. She always charges it. She always responds. And my father's not responding either. I'm in Austin. I can't just depart right now. Please, can you go verify on her? Please. I was already seizing my keys. Yeah, naturally. I'm proceeding there now. Thank you. Seriously, just ensure she's acceptable. I disconnected and pulled on a hoodie. The journey to her residence was only about 15 minutes, but it felt extended. My mind maintained racing to possibilities. Perhaps she was asleep. Perhaps she was in the shower. Perhaps everything was fine and Liam was just overthinking. But something in his voice informed me that wasn't it. The streets were vacant. Most individuals were already in bed, lights extinguished in their residences, the variety of quiet that makes everything feel heavier. I rotated onto her street and observed her residence at the conclusion of the block. The porch light was illuminated, which was a beneficial sign, but the remainder of the residence was dark. No TV glow in the windows. No movement, just stillness. I parked in the driveway and exited. The air was cool, almost cold, and I could hear crickets somewhere in the distance. I walked up the path to the front entrance, my footsteps sounding too loud in the quiet. I was about to knock when I observed her. She was positioned on the front steps, not inside, not on the porch swing, just positioned on the concrete steps in sweatpants and t-shirt. No jacket, no coat. Her arms were wrapped around her knees, like she was attempting to hold herself together. Her face was rotated down, and even from where I stood, I could observe her shoulders shaking slightly. I halted walking. For a second, I didn't comprehend what to execute. This wasn't the Christine I remembered. That Christine stood tall, smiled easily, moved through rooms like she possessed them. This version appeared small, broken. Christine, I stated quietly. She glanced up rapidly, like she'd been caught executing something she wasn't supposed to. Her eyes were red and swollen, the variety of red that arrives from hours of crying. Her cheeks were streaked with dried tears. She stared at me for a moment like she didn't recognize me, and then something softened in her face. Jake. Her voice arrived out weak and small. I walked closer, halting a few feet away. Liam contacted me. He's been attempting to reach you. He's worried. She nodded slowly, her eyes dropping back to the ground. My phone's inside. I waited. She didn't state anything else, just sat there staring at the concrete like it held answers she couldn't discover. I glanced at the dark residence behind her, then back at her. Something was very incorrect. Are you acceptable? I inquired even though I already recognized the response. She permitted out a breath that sounded more like a shudder. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then quietly, almost like she was discussing to herself, she stated he departed. I felt my chest constrict. Who departed? My husband. Her voice cracked on the word. He packed his things this morning and he departed just like that. Stated he's been unhappy for years. Stated he encountered someone else, someone younger. She laughed, but it wasn't a genuine laugh. It was bitter and broken. He didn't even hesitate, didn't glance back. Just walked out like I was nothing. I didn't comprehend what to state. What do you state to something like that? Sorry felt too small. Everything felt too small. She wiped at her face with the back of her hand. I've been positioned out here since this afternoon. I can't go inside. Every room in that residence feels like it belongs to someone else now, like I'm a stranger in my own residence. I sat down on the step adjacent to her. Not too close, just close sufficient to permit her recognize she wasn't alone. We sat in silence for a while. She maintained staring straight ahead, arms still wrapped around her knees. I could hear her breathing, uneven and shaky. I don't comprehend what I'm supposed to execute, she whispered. I provided him everything. 23 years. and he just walked away like none of it mattered. I desired to inform her it would be acceptable, that she'd progress through this. But those words felt hollow and useless, so instead, I just remained. Sometimes, that's all you can execute, just be there. She rotated her head slightly to glance at me. Her eyes were searching, desperate, like she was seeking for something solid to hold on to. Then, so quietly, I almost didn't hear it, she stated, "Please don't depart me alone tonight." My heart halted. Not in a dramatic manner, just in a quiet, heavy manner that made everything else fade. She wasn't requesting for anything complicated. She wasn't requesting for answers or solutions. She was just requesting not to be alone. "Acceptable," I stated. She blinked like she hadn't anticipated me to agree so easily. "Acceptable? Yeah, acceptable." She permitted out a breath, and for the initial time since I'd arrived, I observed something other than pain in her eyes. Relief. Small, fragile relief. I stood up and held out my hand. She glanced at it for a moment, then accepted it. Her hand was cold. I assisted her to her feet, and we walked to my truck without another word. She acquired in the passenger seat and pulled her knees up to her chest. I commenced the engine and pulled out of the driveway. I didn't comprehend where we were proceeding. I just recognized we were departing. I drove without thinking, just permitting my hands accept us wherever they desired. Christine sat curled up in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the dark streets sliding by. She hadn't stated a word since we departed her residence. I didn't push. Sometimes silence is the only thing that makes sense. After about 20 minutes, I discovered myself proceeding toward Cherry Creek Reservoir. I wasn't certain why, perhaps because it was open, quiet, away from everything. Perhaps because I remembered Liam mentioning once that his mother used to proceed there when she required to clear her head. Or perhaps I just didn't comprehend where else to proceed. The parking lot was vacant when we pulled in. Just a few dim streetlights and the enormous stretch of water beyond, black and still under the night sky. I rotated off the engine and we sat there in the quiet. The only sound was the faint rustle of wind through the trees. Christine ultimately spoke. "I haven't been here in years." I glanced over at her. She was still staring out the window, but her voice sounded different now, less broken, more distant, like she was somewhere else in her mind. "Liam informed me you used to arrive here," I stated. She nodded slowly. "I executed when things acquired difficult. When I required to think," she paused. "You transported me here once. Do you remember?" I frowned, attempting to pull the memory up. Then it struck me. "That was a long time ago. You were 18. Perhaps you'd arrived by the residence to deposit something off for Liam, and he wasn't home." I was in the driveway. She permitted out a soft breath. I'd been crying. Another confrontation with my husband. A bad one. "You inquired if I was acceptable, and I stated yes, but you didn't believe me." I remembered now. She'd been standing by her vehicle, sunglasses on, even though it was almost evening. I'd recognized something was incorrect, but didn't comprehend what to execute about it. "You informed me individuals who state they're acceptable when they're not usually require assistance the most," she continued. "Then you inquired if I desired to proceed somewhere, anywhere. And I stated yes. We arrived here," I stated quietly. "We executed. You didn't inquire me what was incorrect. You didn't attempt to repair anything. You just sat with me, permitted me breathe. And when I was prepared, you drove me residence." She rotated to glance at me now, her eyes catching the faint light from the street lamp. "That signified more to me than you comprehend." I didn't comprehend what to state to that, so I just nodded. She glanced back out at the water. "That night, when I acquired residence, my husband apologized, stated he'd been stressed, stated he'd execute better, that he still loved me, and I believed him." Her voice acquired quieter. I believed him for years. Every time we confronted, every time he pulled away, I informed myself it would acquire better, that he'd arrive back to me, but he never executed. He just maintained drifting further and further until today when he ultimately permitted go completely. I felt something twist in my chest. Not pity, something heavier, anger perhaps, at him, at the situation, at how unfair it all was. He stated I wasn't sufficient anymore. She continued, stated he required something different, someone who made him feel alive again, like I was just some weight dragging him down. She laughed that bitter laugh again. 23 years and I wasn't sufficient. "That's not accurate," I stated, the words arriving out harder than I signified them to. She glanced at me surprised. "You are sufficient," I stated. "He's the one who couldn't observe it." Her eyes filled with tears again, but she didn't glance away. "You don't have to state that." "I'm not just stating it, it's accurate." For a moment, we just glanced at each other. Then she wiped at her eyes and rotated back to the water. We sat in silence again, but this time it felt different, less heavy, like something had shifted. After a while, she spoke again. I feel like a stranger to myself, like I've devoted so long being his wife, being Liam's mother, being what everyone else required, that I forgot who I was underneath all of that, and now I don't comprehend how to discover her again. Perhaps you don't have to discover her, I stated. Perhaps you just have to permit her arrive back. She tilted her head slightly, thinking about that. Then she nodded. Perhaps. We remained there for another hour, discussing in bursts and falling into comfortable silences. She informed me about the early years of her marriage back when things were beneficial. She informed me about the slow fade, the manner love transforms into routine and routine transforms into nothing. She informed me about all the nights she'd sat alone in that residence, wondering if things would ever alter, hoping they would, recognizing deep down they wouldn't. And I listened. Genuinely listened, not attempting to repair anything or offer solutions, just permitting her speak. At some point, I noticed her shivering slightly. The temperature had dropped, and she was still in just a t-shirt and sweatpants. You hungry? I inquired. She thought about it. I don't comprehend. Perhaps. I can't inform if I actually desire food or if I just desire to feel normal again. We can determine that out, I stated. There's a diner not too distant from here, open all night. She nodded, but then her face altered. She glanced down at her hands, twisting them together. Jake, I can't proceed residence tonight. I can't sleep in that bed. Not yet. I just can't. I comprehended immediately. Acceptable. She glanced up at me. Something vulnerable and scared in her eyes. I recognize that sounds insane. I recognize this is a lot to inquire, but I don't possess anywhere else to proceed, and I don't desire to be alone. It's not insane, I stated, and you're not requesting too much. We'll determine something out. Relief washed over her face. Thank you. I commenced the truck and pulled back onto the road. We discovered the diner initially, a small 24-hour place with vinyl booths and bright fluorescent lights. We slid into a booth near the back, and she ordered coffee while I acquired us both some food. She picked out a sandwich, consuming slowly, but at minimum she was consuming. After we finished, I drove us to a motel I'd passed on the manor. Nothing fancy, just clean and quiet. I acquired us a room with 2 beds, and we proceeded inside. The room was basic, 2 beds with floral comforters, a small table between them, a TV mounted on the wall, and a tiny bathroom. Christine stood in the doorway for a moment, just glancing around, then walked in and sat on the edge of the distant bed. I positioned my keys on the table and rotated to her. You should attempt to acquire some rest. She nodded, but didn't relocate. Just sat there with her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. The silence stretched out, heavy but not uncomfortable. Outside, I could hear the faint sound of traffic on the highway, a steady hum that filled the quiet. I can't remember the final time I just sat somewhere without having to be somewhere else, she stated ultimately. She pulled her legs up onto the bed, positioned cross-legged. There was always something to execute. Laundry, grocery shopping, dinner plans, ensuring everyone else possessed what they required. I sat down on the other bed, confronting her. You don't have to execute any of that tonight. Do you ever feel like you were supposed to be one variety of individual your whole life? She continued, glancing over at me now. And then something occurs and suddenly you don't even recognize yourself anymore. Yeah, I stated, leaning back against the headboard. Usually around 3 in the morning when I can't sleep and commence thinking too much. That acquired a small smile out of her. Not a large one, but genuine. It softened her face a little, made her appear less like someone barely holding it together and more like someone who might actually be acceptable eventually. She shifted on the bed, pulling the extra blanket around her shoulders, even though the room wasn't cold. I maintained thinking about all the things I should have stated to him. All the times I remained quiet because it was easier than confronting. I became so small, Jake. So invisible. I didn't comprehend what to state to that, so I just permitted her discuss. He used to glance at me like I mattered, she stated, her voice acquiring quieter. In the beginning, I signified like what I thought or desired actually signified something to him. But somewhere along the manor, I just became part of the furniture. Just there, always there, but never genuinely observed. The hum of traffic outside continued, filling the spaces between her words. I could hear someone in the room adjacent door rotate on a TV, the muffled sound of voices bleeding through the thin walls. Then silence again. You didn't deserve that, I stated. She glanced at me for a long moment, then wiped at her eyes rapidly like she didn't desire me to observe. Thank you for stating that. We sat there without discussing for a while after that. I thought about ordering coffee, but determined against it. We both just required to be still for a moment. This is peculiar, correct? She stated suddenly. Me being here with you, Liam's friend. This whole situation. Yeah, I admitted. It's definitely not how I anticipated my Thursday night to proceed. She laughed a little at that, a genuine laugh this time. Me neither, But I don't think it's bad peculiar, I supplemented. Just different. She nodded slowly. Then her expression altered. Something crumbled in her face. I provided him 23 years, Jake. 23 years of my life. And he just walked away like it signified nothing. Her voice cracked on the final word, and I observed her commence to break down. She pressed her hands over her eyes, shoulders shaking, and I didn't think, just relocated. I crossed to her bed and sat down adjacent to her, positioning my arm around her shoulders. She rotated into me and cried, genuinely cried. These deep sobs that sounded like they'd been locked up inside her for months or perhaps years. I didn't attempt to halt her or inform her it would be acceptable. I just permitted her cry, my hand resting on her back, feeling completely out of my depth, but recognizing that departing wasn't an option. She'd inquired me not to depart her alone tonight, and I signified it when I agreed. After a while, the crying slowed down. She pulled back a little, wiping her face with her sleeves, appearing embarrassed. I'm sorry. I didn't signify to fall apart like that. Don't apologize, I stated. You're permitted to fall apart. She accepted a shaky breath and nodded. We sat there side by side on the bed, not contacting anymore, but close sufficient that I could feel the warmth arriving off her. Inform me something about your life, she stated suddenly, something normal. I required to think about anything other than my own chaos right now. So I informed her about work, about this customer who transported in a classic Mustang last week that was in terrible shape, but possessed so much potential. I informed her about my apartment and how I'd been signifying to paint the living room for 6 months, but maintained positioning it off. I informed her about the time Liam and I attempted to construct a treehouse when we were 12, and it collapsed the initial time we climbed into it. She listened, actually listened, inquiring questions and smiling at the correct parts. And slowly, I watched some of the tension depart her shoulders. She leaned back against the headboard adjacent to me. Thank you, she stated quietly. For what? For remaining. For not creating this more complicated than it requires to be. For just being here. I didn't comprehend what to state to that, so I just nodded. We sat there together. As the night acquired later, at some point she reached over and accepted my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. It wasn't romantic or sexual, just connection, just two individuals holding on to each other in the middle of something neither of us fully comprehended yet. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with both of us. I relocated back to my own bed, and we both settled in under the covers. The room went dark except for the faint glow of the parking lot lights through the curtains. Within minutes, I could hear her breathing even out as she fell asleep. I lay there for a while longer, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had occurred. Then sleep pulled me under too. Morning arrived with soft gray light filtering through the thin curtains. I woke up initially, still fully clothed on top of the covers, and could hear Christine's steady breathing from the other bed. She was curled on her side, confronting the wall, ultimately acquiring the rest she required. I remained quiet, not desiring to wake her. I acquired up carefully and noticed the coffee creator in the corner, one of those tiny, single-serve ones with packets that appeared like they'd been positioned there since 2015. I created 2 cups anyway. The smell must have woken her because her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the light. What time is it? She mumbled. A little after 7. She sat up, wincing and rubbing her neck. Did I actually sleep? Yeah, you required it. She accepted the coffee I handed her and supplemented 2 sugars from the packets on the tray. No cream. Thank you, she stated softly. We drank our coffee in comfortable silence, both of us glancing out the window at the parking lot and the mountains visible in the distance. Everything appeared washed clean by the morning light. I don't desire to proceed back yet, she stated suddenly. To the residence. I signify I recognize I have to eventually, but not today. Acceptable, I stated simply. Then we won't. She glanced at me like she was attempting to determine out if I signified it. You don't have to execute this, Jake. You've already executed more than sufficient. I'm certain you possess work or things you require to execute. I contacted in this morning, I stated, informed them I possessed a family emergency. And honestly, I don't possess anywhere else I require to be right now. Something shifted in her expression, like relief mixed with gratitude. Thank you. We checked out of the motel around 8 and I commenced the engine. Where do you desire to proceed? I inquired. She thought about it for a moment. Somewhere I can breathe. Somewhere that doesn't remind me of anything. I drove us west toward the mountains. The roads acquired quieter as we ascended, fewer vehicles, more trees. She rolled down her window and permitted the cool air in, closing her eyes and just feeling it. We halted at a small town for breakfast, consumed at a diner where nobody recognized us, then maintained proceeding. Around noon, we discovered ourselves at a trailhead. Not a difficult hike, just a few miles through pine trees with a lookout point at the conclusion. She glanced at the trail map posted by the parking lot. Can we walk? Of course. We commenced up the path. She was quiet at initial, just concentrating on positioning one foot in front of the other. But as we acquired further from the parking lot, I observed her shoulders relax a little. The trees were tall and the air smelled like pine and dirt. We passed a few other hikers heading down, exchanged nods, maintained proceeding up. About halfway up, she halted at a fallen log and sat down. I joined her, and we just sat there listening to the wind moving through the branches. This is the initial time I felt like I could actually breathe since yesterday morning, she stated quietly. I'm glad. She glanced over at me. I don't comprehend what I would have executed if you hadn't appeared up. You would have determined something out. You're stronger than you think. She smiled a little at that. I don't feel strong. You don't have to feel it for it to be accurate. We remained there for another 10 minutes before continuing up. The trail opened up at the top to a lookout point with a view of the valley below. Mountains stretched out in every direction, the sky enormous and blue. Christine walked to the railing and just stood there, staring. I've forgotten how small everything appears from up here, she stated. All those problems that feel so enormous, they just disappear when you observe this. She rotated to glance at me. Is it peculiar that I feel more like myself right now than I have in years? I don't think so. I think you're just ultimately permitting yourself feel what you've been holding back. She leaned against the railing, the wind catching her hair. I've devoted so long being acceptable for everyone else. Creating certain Liam was acceptable. Creating certain my husband was acceptable. I forgot to verify if I was acceptable. And now I don't even comprehend what that means anymore. Perhaps that's something you acquire to determine out now, I stated. She glanced at me, something vulnerable in her eyes. Will you assist me determine it out? For as long as you require, I stated. We stood there for a long time, the wind picking up a little and rustling through the trees around us. A couple of hikers passed by, nodding hello, and we nodded back. Normal individuals executing normal things while everything between Christine and me felt anything but normal. Ultimately, she pushed away from the railing. Can we maintain walking? We continued up the trail, proceeding slower now, halting when something caught our attention. A bird neither of us could identify, a rock formation that appeared like someone had stacked it on purpose. A patch of wildflowers somehow still blooming this late in the season. She accepted pictures with her phone, the initial time I'd observed her utilize it since the night before. Liam's probably worried, she stated, glancing at the display. I should text him. What are you going to state? She thought about it, then typed something rapidly and struck send before she could second guess herself. Just informed him, I'm acceptable and I require a few days. That's accurate, sufficient. Her phone buzzed almost immediately with his response, but she didn't read it out loud. Just smiled a little and positioned the phone back in her pocket. We hiked for another hour before rotating back. Both of us tired, but in a beneficial manner. By the time we reached the truck, my legs were sore and Christine was breathing difficult. But there was color in her cheeks and something lighter in the manner she relocated. I'm hungry, she announced as we climbed back into the truck. Actually hungry. Not just consuming because I should. I grinned. Progress. We discovered a small diner about 15 minutes from the park. The variety of place with vinyl booths and laminated menus, and a waitress who contacted everyone honey. Christine ordered a full breakfast, eggs and bacon, and toast and hash browns, and actually consumed most of it. I watched her across the table, relieved to observe her accepting care of herself, even in this small manner. What? She inquired, catching me staring. Nothing. Just glad you're consuming. She smiled and stole a piece of bacon off my plate. This feels normal, positioned here with you. It shouldn't, but it executes. After we finished consuming, neither of us was prepared to proceed back yet. I suggested we discover a place to remain for the night, somewhere near the mountains where we could just breathe for another day. She agreed immediately, relief clear on her face. We discovered a small cabin rental about 20 minutes away. It wasn't fancy, just one room with a fireplace, a kitchenette, and a bed, but it felt private and peaceful. We checked in, and I commenced a fire while Christine stood by the window glancing out at the trees. I can't remember the final time I executed something just for me, she stated softly. Not because I possessed to, not because someone else required me to, just because I desired to. Then this is long overdue, I stated. She rotated from the window and glanced at me. Something vulnerable in her expression. Can I inquire you something? Naturally. Why are you executing all this? Genuinely? I thought about it for a moment. Because when Liam contacted, he was scared, and when I observed you positioned on those steps, you appeared broken. And I couldn't just walk away from that. You required someone, and I occurred to be there. It's more than that, though, isn't it? She stated quietly. I met her eyes. Perhaps. I don't comprehend. I just recognize that being here feels correct. She crossed the room slowly and stood in front of me. Then, without stating anything, she leaned in and kissed me. It was soft and hesitant, like she was inquiring a question. I kissed her back, answering it. When we pulled apart, neither of us spoke for a moment. The fire crackled behind us, filling the silence. "I'm not requesting for promises," she stated. "I'm not requesting for anything beyond tonight. I just required to recognize if this was genuine, if I was imagining it." "You're not imagining it," I stated. She accepted my hand and led me to the bed. We sat down together and she rested her head on my shoulder. Her breathing slowed, but she wasn't asleep, just resting. I maintained, thinking about how 2 days ago I didn't comprehend I'd be here, how she didn't comprehend she'd depart her residence with nothing but the clothes she was wearing. Life shifts rapidly sometimes. We devoted most of the evening by the fire, discussing in low voices about nothing important. Favorite foods, worst jobs we'd ever possessed, songs we'd listened to on repeat, normal things that felt special just because we were sharing them. As the night deepened, something shifted between us. The space felt smaller, more intimate. She glanced at me differently now, like she was permitting herself to feel something she'd maintained buried for a long time. "I maintain waiting for this to feel incorrect," she stated quietly, "but it doesn't. Perhaps because it's not," I stated. She relocated closer and we kissed again, slower this time, like we possessed all the time in the world. The room remained warm from the fire. Outside, I could hear the wind moving through the trees, but inside it felt separate from everything else, like we'd stepped out of the regular world for a moment. We relocated to the bed, not because of urgency, but because positioned on the floor was acquiring uncomfortable. She pulled the blanket over both of us, and we remained close, her head on my chest, my arm around her. This wasn't just comfort anymore. It was connection, genuine and deliberate. "Thank you for creating me feel like I matter again," she whispered. "You do matter," I stated. We lay there together, not rushing, just being present with each other. Whatever this was between us, it felt honest. No games, no pretending, just two individuals discovering something genuine in the middle of chaos. Eventually, sleep discovered us. We remained tangled together, her fingers resting against my chest. Both of us peaceful for the initial time and days. Morning arrived slowly. I woke to discover Christine already awake, positioned by the window with a cup of coffee, staring out at the mountains. She appeared different, not repaired, but steadier somehow. "Morning," I stated. She rotated and smiled. "Morning." I joined her by the window and we sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and watching the world wake up. Eventually she spoke. "I require to proceed back today," she stated. "Confront the residents, determine out what arrives next." I nodded. "Acceptable. But I'm glad I possessed these days with you. They provided me something I didn't comprehend I required." We packed up slowly, neither of us eager to depart, but both recognizing it was time. The journey back to Denver felt different than the journey out. The air between us wasn't tense, just heavy with recognizing. She maintained her hand on the seat between us, and halfway through the trip, I reached over and held it. She squeezed back without glancing at me. We didn't discuss much. There wasn't much to state that wouldn't break whatever we were holding on to. When I pulled into her driveway, she stared at the residence like it was a stranger's place. The porch light was still illuminated from 3 days ago, and the mailbox was full. She didn't relocate directly away, just sat there glancing. Ultimately, she opened the door and stepped out slowly. I followed her up to the front entrance and waited while she unlocked it. Inside, everything was precisely how she'd departed it. Same shoes by the entrance, same jacket on the hook. But it felt different now, like the residence was waiting to observe what she'd execute next. She walked through each room slowly, contacting the back of the couch, straightening a picture frame on the wall. I remained near the doorway, providing her space to determine out how she felt. She halted in the kitchen and leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely. "The residence isn't broken," she stated, "just confused about who resides in it now." I nodded, not certain what to state. She rotated to confront me, her expression softer than before. "You assisted me feel alive again, like I could breathe. I won't forget what this signified." She paused, selecting her words carefully, "But I require to stand alone for a while, determine out who I am without leaning on anyone. I hope you comprehend. I execute," I stated, and I executed. She stepped closer and embraced me, her arms tight around me like she was holding on to something she recognized she possessed to permit go. When she pulled back, she kissed me on the cheek, gentle and final. I walked to the entrance, halted for a second, then stepped outside. She didn't follow, and I didn't glance back. The next few days felt strange. I proceeded back to work, back to the shop, back to the same routine I'd possessed before, but something had shifted in me. I couldn't name it precisely, just recognized it was there. Liam texted me on Tuesday thanking me for verifying on his mother. He stated she seemed different, steadier. I informed him she just required someone to listen. I didn't clarify the remainder. There was no reason to. On Thursday, a letter arrived in the mail. Plain white envelope, my name inscribed in neat handwriting, no return address. I opened it carefully, not certain what to anticipate. Inside was a single piece of paper folded in half. She thanked me for appearing up when I didn't possess to, for creating her feel like she mattered again. She stated she'd never forget what those days signified to her. Then arrived the part that made me read it twice. She stated she'd filed for divorce, that she was marketing the residence and commencing fresh somewhere new. And then, at the very bottom, she inscribed that if I desired to observe where this could proceed, she'd be at Cherry Creek Reservoir next Saturday at sunset. She didn't inquire me to arrive, just stated she'd be there. I folded the letter and positioned it on the table. My initial thought was that it was too complicated, that acquiring involved with my best friend's mother wasn't something I should execute. But my second thought was louder. It reminded me of how she appeared standing at that lookout point, ultimately breathing again. How she felt adjacent to me by the fire. How genuine everything had been. Saturday arrived faster than I anticipated. I devoted most of the day attempting to discuss myself out of proceeding. But when the sun commenced dropping, I grabbed my keys and proceeded out. The journey felt longer than usual, even though it wasn't. When I pulled into the parking lot, I observed her positioned on the same bench we'd sat on that initial night. She was confronting the water, her arms resting on her knees. I parked and walked over slowly. She must have heard my footsteps because she rotated before I reached her. Her face broke into a smile, the variety that reaches your eyes. I sat down, adjacent to her, close sufficient that our legs contacted. For a minute, neither of us stated anything. Then I inquired her what arrived next. She glanced at me, still smiling, and stated she didn't comprehend, but she desired to discover out. I informed her I executed too. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I positioned my arm around her. The sun dropped lower, painting the water orange and pink. We remained there as the sky shifted colors, both of us quiet but not uncomfortable. This wasn't about sprinting away anymore, it was about selecting something genuine, even if it scared us. She lifted her head and glanced at me. I don't possess expectations. I don't require promises. I just desire to observe what this could be if we provided it a chance. That sounds correct to me, I stated. We stood up together and walked back toward the parking lot. This time, we weren't stating goodbye. We were commencing something new, something that didn't possess a map or a plan. Just two individuals determining to accept a chance on whatever this was between us. Recognizing it wouldn't be simple, recognizing people might not comprehend, but not caring about any of that because for the initial time in a long time, we both felt alive. The sun continued to drop as we reached my truck. She halted before acquiring in and glanced at me. Thank you for observing me when I felt invisible. I reached for her hand. Thank you for permitting me. We acquired in the truck together, and I commenced the engine. The road ahead was uncertain, complicated, full of questions we didn't possess answers to yet. But as I pulled out of the parking lot with her hand in mine, I recognized we'd determine it out, one day at a time, together.